Thank you, Mr. President. Palestinian territories are going through horrific developments. The number of victims of Israeli military action on Gaza exceeded 5,000. Innocent Palestinian civilians, among them more than 2,000 children, in a matter of 3 weeks. The war machine continues indiscriminately to claim lives without any distinction. Despite this humanitarian shock and the loss of lives around the clock, it is regrettable, it is shameful that some continue to justify what is happening, citing the right to self-defense and resisting terrorism. I wonder today, what right justifies not distinguishing between an enemy to be targeted and unarmed civilians destined to live for centuries in this particular part of their homeland and to be subjected to a blockade? 2.5 million civilians are being killed, starved, and forcibly displaced. The scenes of this crisis since its beginning have been heart-wrenching. The children that lost their lives or lost their mothers or their siblings or their fathers do not deserve what's happening to them. They're not responsible for what is happening to them. Our conscience cannot bear their suffering. Silence, in this case, is tantamount to giving blessings, not naming things by their names and merely calling for respecting international humanitarian law without describing what is happening as an actual violation of international humanitarian law and human rights that lip service is paid to. All this is tantamount to participating in the crimes, reducing the suffering of the Palestinian people that has been going on for 7 decades to the circumstances of the last chapter of this suffering is an attempt to justify flagrant violations of international law and international humanitarian law. They are tantamount to giving the green light to perpetuating unprecedented suffering inflicted on the people of Gaza. Mr. President, Egypt has condemned the targeting of civilians, any civilians. I repeat and reaffirm once again that Egypt does not accept any targeting of unarmed civilians by any party or capturing them for them to become a bargaining chip. We do not accept any justification in this regard. We call for releasing the captured. Humanity is indivisible and is not selective. Some are busy with playing the blame game, while destruction and death continue unabated. Those need to recognize that today's situation did not come from nothing. It is a result of accumulated practices and policies with the sole goal of entrenching an illegal occupation, usurping the land from its rightful owners, and imposing a new demographic reality. Egypt has warned time and again of merely timidly calling for reviving the peace process, of inaction of the international community, not using the tools at its disposal to enforce international consensus on the settlement of the Palestinian questions based on a two-state solution and Security Council resolutions. We've also warned at several occasions of the continued and intensified Israeli practices lately, especially persisting in weakening the Palestinian Authority, saying that peace is no longer feasible. The policies of separating the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, the blockade on the Strip, the storming by the Israeli military of the towns of the West Bank, desecrating holy places, Israel reneging on any understandings to de-escalate the situation on the ground, all of the above led us to this desperate moment. Mr. President, Security Council and General Assembly resolutions over the history of the crisis reflected an unequivocal and clear unanimity that the Palestinian question needs to be settled, not liquidated by military action or settlement. or by what we're seeing today, namely forced displacement. I reiterate what Egypt has stated during the Cairo Peace Summit, that the solution to the Palestinian question is not forced displacement, not moving the Palestinian people to other places. The only solution is justice by granting the Palestinians their legitimate rights in self-determination, in living in dignity and peace and safety in their independent state on their territories, just like any other people in the world. The Palestinian people will not leave its land. It's holding on to this land. Egypt will not accept for the Palestinian people to be forcibly displaced, and we will not accept any liquidation of the Palestinian question at Egypt's expense. A look at history clearly reveals that the Palestinian people, despite the challenges, remained resistant on its territory, and the Palestinian questions throughout the history also did not die. It too remained resistant, given the legitimate demands of the Palestinian people and their rights that are beyond disputes. What has the world gained as a result of deferring the solution? More tension, more pain in occupied Palestine, in Israel, and in the whole region. Mr. President, we followed with regret the inability of this August Council twice to adopt a resolution or even to call for a ceasefire to end this war. In light of this crisis situation, we're also surprised by new attempts to adopt resolutions that don't include any call for ceasefire to prevent any further deterioration of the situation, which might lead the region to a dangerous juncture with grave repercussions. What is being tabled, some of what's being tabled today in the Council, amounts to a new attempt to justify the continuation of this war. This is not in line with the Charter of the United Nations that established this Council and determined its mandate. Egypt provided a platform for heads of states and government through the Cairo Peace that was held on the 21st of this month to contain the situation and to provide a political framework to deal with this crisis rather than giving free rein to destruction, killing, and violence. At this summit, we pursued an approach that is not politicized, that takes into account the urgent humanitarian dimension of this catastrophe. We aimed at reaching a consensus, even if just in principle, on a de-escalation to stop the war and to prevent more destruction, to ensure the delivery of humanitarian aid and revive the peace process. We will not rest until this war ends. However, to be very honest, we regret the double standards we've seen since the beginning of this crisis when dealing with international crisis, especially the humanitarian dimension. Some rush to show sympathy with civilian victims in certain places and condemn in the strongest terms possible those responsible for civilian casualties. At the same time, they prefer to turn a blind eye and rush to justify the killing and the targeting of civilians and their civilian infrastructure in a different place, as if the lives of civilians in Palestine mattered less than the lives of others, as if Palestinian lives did not deserve the same efforts to protect them and to defend them. Mr. President, I came today representing Egypt, which opened the door for peace in the region, to warn of the grave repercussions of international failure to deal with the current crisis and its repercussions on peace in the region and the aspirations of the peoples of the region to peace, coexistence, and stability. And I ask you today, before it's too late, given that the Council is the highest political body entrusted with the maintenance of international peace and security. I'll call you to do the following. 1. Sustainable and immediate ceasefire in Gaza without any conditions. 2nd, put an end to all the practices that aim to forcibly displace the Palestinian people in their land or outside their land, which is a grave violation of international law, humanitarian international law, and amounts to a war crime. 3, provide international protection immediately to the unarmed Palestinian people. 4th, ensure the safe, prompt, and sustainable delivery of humanitarian aid to Gaza. Israel must bear its responsibilities as the occupying power. 5, we must reach a binding formula to settle the Israeli-Palestinian conflict according to the agreed-upon parameters set out in Security Council resolutions, which provide for the end of the occupation and establish a Palestinian state along the lines of the 4th of June, 1967, with East Jerusalem as its capital. 6, this council must bear its responsibility and work on launching an independent investigation of the flagrant violations of international law and international humanitarian law. Mr. President, the above is the least we would expect of this august council, the main body responsible for the maintenance of international peace and security before the current crisis worsens even further, before it spills over to other countries of the region, before we have to go back to this council to discuss a deeper and a bigger crisis, before it is too late. I thank you, Mr. President. May the peace, blessings, and mercy of God be upon you.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Shukri for his statement.